Good morning and a very happy International Women's Day 2023. Thank you all for joining us to celebrate International Women's Day today. My name is Louise Fellows. I'm VP of Northern Europe here at HashiCorp, and I'm going to be hosting today's panel as we discuss equity in tech. I'm thrilled to be here as this is a topic that I'm extremely passionate about, and every year International Women's Day has a theme. And this year, the theme is embracing equity. And while there's so many aspects to equity for women, for the next hour, we're going to be focusing on the issues facing the tech industry in particular. I saw a really interesting quote on LinkedIn this morning, actually, and it was a shoe analogy that I'll just share, saying that equality is giving everyone a shoe and equity is giving everyone a shoe that fits. So I just wanted to bring what I think embracing equity means to life a little bit. I've worked in the tech industry myself for the last 27 years, and throughout my career, I've been fortunate enough to have worked with many women and men from all walks of life. And I've been really privileged positioned to provide a supporting environment myself in order for female talent to really flourish. So as well as sharing my own experiences today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by an experienced panel who all have unique insights, perspectives, and stories to share. But just before we begin, I just wanted to give a quick reminder of our HashiCorp Code of Conduct. We'll be putting that link in the chat now. This is really to ensure that we're providing a really supportive and welcoming community for everybody that's joined us today. We'll aim to have a 15-minute Q&A at the end of the session, so feel free to get your questions in the chat and we'll get to them when we can and to the Q&A session. And with all that said and done, let's introduce our amazing panel here today. So joining me, we have Duncan Greenwood, who is the VP for EMEA here at HashiCorp. We have Sarah Polan, our Field CTO for EMEA here at HashiCorp. And we have Denise Dourado, the Director of Digital and Application Innovation at Microsoft. Welcome to all of you and thank you so much for being here today. Denise, as our very special guest today, we're going to start with you, if that's okay. And you mentioned to me a little while ago while we were chatting that you actually started your career in languages. And I think it'd be a really interesting place to start to hear more about how you've ended up where you are now and what role equity has really played in that journey for you.
Great, and hi Louise, and thank you for having me on the HashiCorp panel. Great to be here. Yes, we were talking about sort of different routes, and sort of mine was quite a circuitous route into tech. So I studied a languages, French and German, and economics degree. And my first ever role was actually on a foreign exchange floor as a corporate dealer. So it was sort of not what I'd imagined and not where I'd expected to start. And basically then it ended up with a route into tech in terms of looking at some of the sort of back end systems, which then led me to study C+ programming. And what really helped me with that was actually having the languages foundations, particularly from a German perspective, very logical, that, you know, the building blocks that created something else, that solving problems, creating solutions. So for me, languages was actually a really, really good entry point into tech. And it's never held me back. And the whole point around equity, I love the point you made around the shoe fitting, because it doesn't have to be the same shoe. It can be whatever type of shoe is right for you. And that is the most important piece. And it's actually bringing that diversity for me. That's the most important thing. There's potential everywhere. It's actually recognizing that potential and not having quite a narrow vision in terms of what that potential should be. So for me, being embraced and welcomed throughout my career, and similar length of career to you, Louise, 27 years, you know, it's great. And I see the doors continually opening, even more so now, I think, than when I first started off in tech. It's been a great journey and very positive journey for me.
Love that. I think that's just a lovely way to open, Denise. Thank you. I think it's really important that we show that diversity of how people can actually get into the world of technology, and how your career can grow. So thank you for sharing that insight. And I'll just quickly flip to Sarah, actually, because Sarah, you equally have a very interesting start to your journey in the world of tech. How do you feel about sharing that with us all today, please?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. I think for me, one of the things that's really important in terms of embracing equity is also embracing where people come from, because it really does add this extra layer to the products that you're trying to create and extra depth. My background is actually in music. So I was a trained opera singer, or I am a trained opera singer, I guess. And also came into the tech world a little bit circuitously. I was working kind of as a side job doing some human resources work and some operational work, and realized that all of this could probably be automated. And that brought me to start talking with one of the directors, and the director said, well, actually a lot of the music people that I know are quite good at tech and code, because really you've been coding your entire life. So, I started music when I was 5, and it's just another type of code. It's another way of putting patterns together and expressing something. It's just a different format. So then moving into coding and applications was quite easy for me. And if I look also around me, it's amazing to see how many musicians are around me. Even within HashiCorp, since I'm quite vocal about coming from a non-traditional background because it is something I'm passionate about. But I've had many, many people reach out to me and go, "Oh, hey, I'm also a professional musician. I come from a musical background." And also, if I look at my graduating class, which was all musicians, a lot of those people have now moved into the tech industry, and they're quite good at it, and they give it just that different point of view that you wouldn't from a technical or a typical computer science background.
Love that. Yeah, brilliant. And I think, and maybe one day we'll be fortunate in HashiCorp to hear you actually singing some opera, Sarah.
There are some recordings out there that still exist.
To do a LinkedIn live on your opera singing, that would be amazing. And I think it's just really important to show that diversity of how our careers all start. I know my personal journey was my mother was actually in tech. She was a PA for many years to a president of Nortel Networks, a very old sort of Canadian telco company, and so I kind of fell into that through summer work and doing various administrative roles myself, and then kind of realized that it was a journey I wanted to go on. And 27 years later, I think my career has grown and developed over the years. So we all, that shoe analogy, we all have different ways of getting in and different fits to get into an organization. So I think that's really important that we've shared that. So thank you so much. And Duncan, as women on this panel here today, we actually can't and haven't achieved what we've been able to achieve without what I feel is great allyship and support from kind of men and women around us as we've entered into the world of work and our careers and have grown. And I think in terms of embracing equity for yourself as a male ally for the tech industry, would you be able to share with us, some of your experiences? Because I know you're very passionate about this topic as well.
No, thank you, Louise, and it's great. It's a privilege to be able to share the platform with you all. I think, and by the way, I'm just glad we didn't go into my career journey. That's another story and nowhere near as interesting. But I think, when actually, to answer your question, I mean, I came into this whole area, I think probably about 15 years ago in my career, as I became an ally in a different company for the LGBTQ community. And really the principles, doesn't matter what area we're looking at, stay the same. I think my underlying principle of equity is about fairness and social justice. So that's where the principles lie, I think, from a values perspective. And being an ally, or probably more of an advocate as much as an ally, is really about being able to try and empathize. I don't think I'll ever truly empathize for obvious reasons, but part of where I approach it from is that ability to seek to understand. Be prepared to sort of feel uncomfortable. And I think part of my journey is about times when I've been making decisions and as an ally, somebody's had to point out to me that my decision probably wasn't quite as equitable as a decision as I thought I was making. And you've got to be uncomfortable with that, and you've got to be prepared to learn. And I think for me, it's about that engagement and be supportive in the partnerships that you're building. And that's what I'm really, really passionate about, is bringing this idea of fairness and the social justice. And then obviously the thing that I do tend to sort of then understand is what that brings to the teams, to the businesses that I've been involved in, where it succeeds really, really well.
Yeah. Thank you, Duncan. And I think there's a few of us probably on this LinkedIn Live that are testament to your allyship in this area. So we're very grateful for your support as our careers have grown as well. Just sticking on the theme of allyship, Denise and Sarah, we'll start with Denise. How has allyship helped you in your career journey? Because I know you've had quite a varied career journey, Denise. You've even done a stint in the public sector as well. So I'm really keen to understand your thoughts and views on allyship.
Yeah, and I did a really long stint in the public sector. So I spent 16 years at NHS Blood and Transplant, and that was at the time when I was having children, and in those days it was not easy for me to stay in the private sector. So it was a really deliberate choice of mine to move. And I tell you that the best allyship I ever had was an HR director, actually, a male HR director, David Evans, if he's still out there. It was absolutely, honestly, he was the strongest coach, mentor, friend I had during my career as I was moving from sort of more junior to senior type roles. Kept me, very strong, firm feedback, no pandering around. But honestly, I learned so much from him. And what I learned as well was he wasn't giving me any kind of favoritism or anything like that. It was fair and it was just. And that's the sort of, role modeling that I took forward in terms of me as a leader with my team. Because I think you can cloud equity in terms of then favouring certain individuals over others, and that's not right either, because all you do then is create resentment. So it needs to be very, very clear guidance, coaching, feedback where it needs to be given, but in a very open and transparent way. And David did that with me, and I learned so much from him. So that's what I took from allyship, which are really strong foundations for me.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Denise. I think back to that point Duncan made about fairness, having somebody that really does give you all of the aspects of, how you're thinking, behaving, your career, to really, give you that honest opinions and views and support. And the support aspect of that is so fundamental, knowing that you've been supported. And Sarah, same sort of like question to you, in terms of allyship, how's that really helped you on your journey?
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't think I would be where I am today without that allyship. Particularly a couple of roles ago, my manager saw me doing things that for him didn't seem quite logical. And so he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, what are you doing? What is your motive behind this?" And I kind of sat down and said, "Hey, look, I'm a single mom. I'm trying to navigate this field where I am the odd person out. People tell me I'm aggressive and, I have a reputation for these things." And for him, having that transparency and understanding where my ambitions were, where I wanted to go, he just said, "Okay, great, let's do this together." And he made a route for me then to make sure that I knew how to navigate my career, and we could sit down and have discussions about, what does the tech culture look like? How are we shaping that? But it also opened up a dialogue with him about, if he said something that didn't feel equitable or, made potentially somebody feel uncomfortable, it meant that we had an open dialogue and I could say, "Hey, yeah, that doesn't fly." And so in that aspect, it became a little bit more circuitous, I guess. And then also, moving into Hashi, I think I'm the only female on the team, and my colleagues and the leadership absolutely have my back when it comes to being the authoritative figure in the room. If, there's a question about, I've had people say, you don't look technical, or, oh, you're technical. And my male colleagues are always the first to go, no, she's the authority. You need to listen to what she says. And I wouldn't have that without that open dialogue and that trust that comes with that allyship.
Yeah, I completely understand, concur, and agree with that. And actually, Duncan, from your perspective, I know we talked about this before, but you've mentioned having some really inspirational female leaders during your career time. So in terms of, allyship, when we talk about it from a female perspective, actually, you've had some inspirational women that you've worked with and for, and what impact have those had on your outlook?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, definitely in the bosses that I've had. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold, but yeah, I think when you think about the bosses, there's three particularly that been really, really strong at giving me that feedback, giving me the coaching, being able to help support me in understanding what I needed to do to further my career, but also sharing some experiences. I think it's quite interesting, Sarah's point about you walk in the room and you're not assumed to be technical, which is hilarious when Sarah and I walk in the room, because I mean, you couldn't think of a further role reversal in life if you tried. But I think, the point about it is not to get overly emotional about it, but to be clear and consistent in the feedback, to be able to take on board the areas that really you don't understand as well as you think you should. But when I think about the three female or women bosses that I've had across different geographies in the US, in Europe, and in the UK, I've been inspired by all three of them, all very different characters as well. But very inspirational in shaping what I'm very proud of as my career.
Fantastic. Thank you. No, really, really great insights. I think when I I read some scary kind of stats this morning, and they're probably well known, that still women only make up 27% of the workforce in the tech industry, which is quite a scary global stat. And then of that, more than 50% are likely to quit before the age of 35. And 56% are potentially likely to quit by their kind of mid-career point. So actually, when we look at how we attract, retain, and grow more women into the tech industry, especially when 52% of the entire globe is made up of women in general, I'm really interested to kind of learn, and Denise, maybe we'll kind of start with you if that's okay. How can we start to, when we look for talent in the industry, and I think we've had a conversation before and you gave some really good insight onto this, what kind of things should and do you look for when we're thinking of bringing on more great women into this industry?
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me, it's around talent starts with having that passion and having that energy and that willingness to learn. So being curious, like it's for me, it's all around that. It's not actually, are you, a STEM graduate, or because I have a real issue when it's really pushed around, we must get more girls into STEM. For me, it's actually around what's an individual's passion, whether you're a boy or a girl, you follow that. And if you really enjoy something, you are more than likely to succeed at it. And as we talked about before, I'm clearly not an opera singer. I can't really sing properly, so I might need some lessons. But, it doesn't matter where you start from. It's having that, clearly you've got to have the core intellect. You've got to have the desire to learn. And you've got to have that certain sense of logic to work in tech, I think, because, some things they're just not suited to certain individuals. If you have that, regardless of the subjects that you've studied, you are brilliant material to come in and work in the tech industry. And I think if we adopt that approach, we will be attracting far more females into the industry. And couple that along with Sarah's story about starting from being an opera singer, you know, you don't have to have that sort of core tech background to be able to succeed in our industry. But there are some certain basic traits that we do expect people to have, and they should have them in order to be able to sort of set up for success. So that's what I really sort of firmly believe in, and that's what we encourage as well in terms of my teams and the way that we engage with people.
Yeah, and I remember when we spoke before, you talked about having that curiosity, and I love that word. I just think if, you know, we should be curious as leaders, that we don't just mirror hiring people in who we think they should be, but also having that curiosity that don't just hire people because they've got a degree in this, that, and the other. You know, actually be curious. So I think you used that quite strongly before, didn't you? You were in your
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely, you can have that.
Yeah, that's great. Sarah, over to you. The same question. You know, when you're kind of looking at talent in the industry, you know, kind of what kind of things do you look for?
Yeah, well, so I think based off of what we know, that gender bias starts at 6 years old. Us trying to get women into STEM once they're in high school and university, it's too late. And based off of what we have to go on now, we need to start looking at how do we adjust our expectations in terms of what that looks like. And really what that means is looking at potential of people and potential of, you know, various backgrounds to integrate into this sort of tech ecosystem. And personally, I mean, obviously I'm a little bit biased when it comes to this, but having that different background breaks us out of also sort of a more closed loop kind of thinking. So if we all have the same vision, we all come from the same background, we're going to produce the same things over and over again. And we're at a stage where it's becoming very critical to innovate, whether that's because we're on the verge of a recession and, you know, we need to be able to innovate to make sure that our companies continue to earn money, or really just because the market is becoming really saturated. So we have to come up with better and different ideas. Also, from a security standpoint, the more differentiating opinion that you have across the board, the more secure your code kind of becomes. So all of these things are really important to help balance everything out. And yeah, if I look at my kids, for example, they think completely differently than I do, but man, they're great at hacking things just because they're so inquisitive and they want to know how it works and they want to be able to get around things because, you know, they want to play Minecraft, but mom says no, but okay, so let's just find a different route into that. And the more creative you can get with these things, the better off your product is in the end.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, really insightful. Thank you so much. And Duncan, just to kind of follow on from that, you've led really large organizations in your career, you know, and, you know, really kind of fostered that kind of adoption of many much female talent in your organizations. You know, kind of what kind of curiosity do you have and kind of, you know, what are you looking for when you're bringing in like great female talent into the organization?
Well, and I think, Louise, you know, as a subject here, and I think it started off in exactly that way when you think about non-traditional backgrounds. And of course, you know, I'm also from a non-traditional background coming into this industry. And I think the real challenge is that it's the open-mindedness to not sort of really just go after the types of people you've already hired or always hired. And that's quite difficult to do, right? You know, it's about you challenging yourself, and that's curiosity starts with the individual in the hiring. And I think the thing with education as well that just sticks out for me, and I agree with what Denise was saying, is that, you know, and what Sarah said about it's too late at times when you come to STEM subjects. The challenge, I think, with education just generally is that we've not changed much in all the time that I've been on this planet, right? And if we change nothing changes. Yet this industry is innovating at a pace that most companies can't even, keep up with. Therefore, you're going to have to do things differently. And I think that to foster, talent into this industry, you've got to look in different places. And I think that's how we foster, talented women coming into our industry, to be curious, to say, well, what's your background? How do we support and enable and educate? How do we coach, mentor, and sponsor? You do need to look at this at an individual leader level, whether you're male or female, and that's how we're going to actually make the difference. So understand that longevity in innovation comes from doing things, challenging things all of the time, and that's what we've got to do as leaders.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Duncan. And I know we're not at Q&A yet, but just because we're on this topic, it's actually the question sort of come to me. But I mentioned, obviously, leadership must foster curiosity. And how can leaders actually how can we do this? And even when you have non-leaders in the business, how can we foster that curiosity in tech? And one of the things I think, if you're in the tech industry, you're not always, the most technical person. And in particular, obviously, I've worked in the tech industry and in sales, and actually women in sales in tech is equally a very, a difficult part of the business, an organization in tech to work for. And actually we could do with attracting, retaining and growing way more women in the sales arena. But for me, in order to get excited and curious about tech, I always think I need to know what it does. What's it going to deliver to that customer that is going to make a difference to their organization, to their life, to how they're going to grow their business. And I think that curiosity for me is, you could tell me all about a product, but please tell me how that's actually going to add value to that customer or to that organization in general. So that's kind of what I think curiosity for me, and how every individual in an organization to be curious about tech is really understand what it does and how it impacts your customer, and then you'll be able to piece it all together like a bit of a puzzle. So yeah, fabulous. Okay, thank you. Right, so we are going to, I think we're about time to move into a Q&A then. So I'm just going to ask some questions, if that's all right. Sarah, actually, just coming back to you, and I can completely stand with you on this point. You mentioned that you're a single parent. Do you have any tips and insights on how to manage a career and parenting? Plus, how do you inspire your children?
Oh, well, inspire them, I don't know, to be perfectly honest. I do my best to, get them involved and keep them curious and try different things. I think if you ask if I'm aspirational to them, they're probably going to say, absolutely not, that's mom. But I'm not sure that that's much different from anybody else on the face of this earth who's a parent. In terms of balancing, it's been a chore for sure. What I've tried to do is outsource anything that I can. If I can give it to somebody, take it off my plate, I do that. And then otherwise, just making sure that when I'm with the kids, I'm with the kids. When I'm working, I'm working. And there's a very clear barrier there. For example, I will block out my calendar from like dinner time until bedtime, just so that I am certain that I am with them 100%. There's an automatic rejection for anybody who tries to schedule a meeting at that time. I'm happy to pick up the phone after they go to bed, especially since I'm working in more of a global role. But that time is absolutely their time, and making sure that I can schedule things up front is really important as well.
I think, can I just add something to that? I talked earlier on about my allyship and getting things wrong. And I think this is one of those areas that men just have to be really, really conscious of. The incident for me, probably about 5-6 years ago, I'd just taken over a particular team in the business I was in the company I was in, and I wanted to bring that leadership team together. And when I looked at the best possible week, I just picked the best possible week that it looked like was available. It needed to be quick because it was one of those urgent and important things to do. And when the responses came back in, I realized that 4 of the team weren't going to be able to attend, and they were all women. And I was frustrated. As an ally, I'm like, why can't they attend? Why aren't they going to attend? So I was inquisitive, and I just rang one and I said, listen, it's really, really, I'm disappointed that you can't attend. And she turned around and she said to me, she said, well, I'm single. That week is a big holiday week in our country. I haven't got anybody to look after my children. And I was like, one of those moments where you go, oh dear, right? So I can almost guarantee that if I make the next 3 phone calls, I'm probably going to get the same feedback. And the privilege I have, of course, is that my partner would be looking after our children that week, and we weren't doing anything, so it didn't matter. And that's one of those things that was where I felt incredibly uncomfortable. And of course, we shifted the meeting, and we had to move it to make sure that we got the participation and the attendance. But I think Sarah's point is really, really difficult, and you've got to be able to have and foster an open dialogue that says, actually, don't arrange the meeting so that I have to travel on a Sunday night that lands me in some strange city somewhere where I'm on my own without the right sort of, support to be able to get to the hotel that I don't know. You've really just got to put some thought into how that's going to work. And it's something that I think you forget as a man, that you have a certain male privilege that you're born with. You can't change it, but you do have to acknowledge it and be understanding that decisions you make have far-reaching impact. So try and get that feedback from the team is my suggestion for that. And that's how I would say they've supported many women in the workplace, because as the world is, there's lots of people who are single parents, both male and female, and you've got to try and support them the best way possible.
Yeah.
And I think as colleagues, you can also help support that just by being clear with scheduling meetings and things like that. So if that's upfront and it's in the agenda and you know what the agenda is, that makes it really easy for me to say, okay, yeah, let's go forward. Let's make sure we put this meeting in because I understand that it's time sensitive and there's a priority there, versus, oh no, okay, we're going to push that to the next week because in this case, yeah, I am going to prioritize my kids and my family. But that's just the reality. So if, as a community and as an organization, you want to put that kind of equity in place, it's just a small courtesy that makes life a lot easier for a lot of people.
And I think it's also about a confidence thing in having that conversation with your manager or your leader to say you actually did. So I think as a leader, like probably you and I, Sarah, wouldn't have any issue in saying, no, we're not going to do this because of this, because we have the experience we've been through, and I'm obviously in the same boat as you as a single parent, so I've had to manage that through the years. But in my early career, when I was too afraid to probably say, oh, I don't want to do this. So I would literally find any way or means of actually getting that support in place to do it. So I think it's fostering an environment where it's okay to have that conversation, say, I really can't make that X event or this, that, and the other because I'm struggling with childcare or other issues. And I think whatever the issue that is, we need to be empathetic and understanding and listening to our teams of people around that and around these difficult subjects, because it is difficult and it's a very real challenge, as you've explained, Sarah. Unless you've got a big support network around you, it's a big challenge.
No, exactly. And I think as an organization and organizationally speaking, as we want to foster more of this growth and more gender diversity across the board, looking at some creative solutions, I think would really help us organizationally as an industry to forward, women in tech. Because realistically speaking, being a woman in tech is a great way to kind of shift that socioeconomic paradigm. So being shut out of that because you're a single parent, because you're having a hard time getting back up or aren't able to travel 50% of the time, it's really a shame that is the reason that we can't get gender diversity. So as you know, in industry, we also need to think about more creative solutions to kind of make this work.
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, I mean, what's great is that we can do that now. I think the sort of tech's changed. It's much better in terms of hybrid meetings. So we do a lot of that in terms of, okay, we try and make in-person events, because I think that's really important as well, particularly for like earlier in career. For me, I'm not, you know, I'm quite happy to be at home in my study and doing what I need to do. That isn't the case for a lot of early in careers. They may not have, you know, the space. They're sharing a kitchen table. They crave that engagement, that energy they get from their peers, and also sort of their leaders as well. But the fact that we can create that environment that suits whoever might want to attend, so whether it's in person, sort of remote, but everybody can join in, that's the most important thing for me. And one of the things that I do is share the experience. I'm not always in person. I'll be remote as well, and make sure that we, you know, engage the people who might be remote versus the people who are in the room, so that we get that balanced experience. And I think we need to do, as leaders, if we do that and we exhibit that, and a bit like to your point around curiosity, Louise, I think something I tend to do is humility is really important. So not pretending that you have all the answers. Particularly when it comes to sort of, there might be new releases, new features of something. And I met my team yesterday and we were talking through it, and I said, what's the difference now? I don't know. And they were talking through it, and it was brilliant, because it was them, you know, coming with a much more informed view than I had, but we were all learning together, and having the right questions and posing them, I think creates that comfort and that safe space.
Yeah. Interestingly, I think COVID was a really interesting catalyst for changing a lot of how, especially in the tech industry, I think we're very fortunate, you know, that we do have the ability to remote work. You know, not all careers and industries are in a fortunate position as we are. And, you know, I think I'm interested sort of, you know, for the views on how do we think COVID, for example, has impacted women staying in tech or being in tech. And actually, I don't think it's just women. I think COVID impacted men and women during that period, because actually the responsibilities became a lot more shared during that period, and probably gave a lot of men a good insight into what their wives actually do day to day, while juggling children, school runs, this, that, the other, and working at the same time. So maybe we could see that from a man's perspective, Duncan. You know, how do you think COVID and life after COVID has impacted women coming and staying in tech, basically?
No, I think it's definitely had an impact. I think the thing is, of course, the industry flourished through that particular period, but you know, now we're seeing the challenge post COVID, obviously, as we go around the world, and we see, you know, companies that scaled quite quickly but not in a sustainable way, having to make some very tough decisions. I think the reality is that it gave everybody an appreciation for things outside of your professional side of your life as to what was going on. I think, you know, I used to, you know, I remember the kids going back to school sort of after the first couple of lockdowns, and you know, absolutely begging to do the school run because it got me away from the screen, right, as an example. And I think that the single biggest challenge we actually really face post COVID is how do we get this hybrid model right? Because as a community and team spirit that you build when you are, and as Denise has already positioned, you know, particularly when you're early in your career, I think there's a lot that goes on around the water cooler, around the coffee machine, that you can learn from, that you're just not going to get over a Zoom call. Interestingly, I had the very same conversation with a candidate for a job, a woman candidate for a job this morning, and who is, I think, quite early in career, but very accomplished and really, really passionate about this. So I think, you know, I think it's changed it for everybody. I think with respect to women coming, you know, staying, and has it impacted? I think what we've got to do, and I'm not sure I've seen any real data or evidence on this. I was disappointed in the stats you gave earlier on, because I do think that this is, you know, a fantastic industry where you can build a really, really positive aspect to your life as a career. And I think, you know, if COVID has taught us one thing, really, it is about that balance. And I think making sure that you understand the balance. It doesn't mean that your productivity drops because you're not in an office. Your productivity can actually go up, but it's probably brought a set of rigors and disciplines into your life that you didn't know that you needed, you know, 3 or 4 years ago. And I think that's the element which people are struggling with just generally. I don't think it's just a male female thing. And so to make sure that we keep people in the industry, I think we've got to, you know, figure out what that hybrid model is really going to look like. And then how do we support people when you are remote? You know, because that's probably the biggest question that we've not fully answered, I don't believe yet.
Yeah. That's really great insight. Thank you, Duncan. And Denise, do you want to share your views on how, you know, what's life at Microsoft post-COVID, and what are you seeing the shift in the market?
So at Microsoft, so what we're doing is it's very much sort of the hybrid experience. So, you know, as an example, I've got an all hands tomorrow, and it's, you know, we're doing some in-person events, but also catering for remote people, sort of teamsing in as well. So I think it's added a lot of choice, a lot of opportunity, a lot of flexibility. But to your point, Duncan, I think there are also challenges that we do need to balance. People being in front of screens for too long. You know, you can easily get chained to. We were talking just before this session about, you know, in fact, we're having to wear glasses now because we clearly, you know, we've been looking at it and thinking about laser surgery, whatever. I think there are things that it's a different way of working, and we need to make sure we manage it and balance it properly. And equally, what I really, really worry about is the early in careers, as I said before, because I think you can have that sense of isolation, and all you know in terms of meeting your peers and your colleagues is through a screen, which I don't think's healthy. I think we need to encourage that mixture of in-person and hybrid. So I think there's the opportunity there, but I think it needs to be considered carefully, and you don't fall into bad habits.
Yeah, great insight. Sarah, anything else to add on the?
No, it just, you know, there was one statistic that I recently read that concerns me a little bit, is that through the pandemic, the number of people joining tech overall increased by 24%, but women decreased by 14%. So it's not trending in the way that I would like to see it trend. Here in the Netherlands, they're expecting another 100 years before we get to, or 87 years before we get to pay parity. You know, we can be doing more. There are things that we can be working towards. COVID opened a lot of doors. It also put a lot of pressure on a lot of people, I think. So it's something to be cognizant about, especially as we return to a more hybrid way of working, that maybe that doesn't work for everybody. And knowing also that women are less likely to speak up about when they're struggling, or because they don't want to be viewed as the problem child. You know, so it's really important for us as leaders to make sure that we're having these dialogues, check-ins, have the, you know, the vulnerable conversations, the difficult conversations, to make sure that, you know, we are addressing this as leaders. I
agree that support and role modeling to allow a very authentic, open discussion, you know, and I think the role of leadership has almost changed as well, you know, in the fact that, you know, we're not physically together. So actually getting to know your people is harder, you know, just doing it over a Zoom call, you know, is not the same as sitting down, having a coffee with somebody and just understanding what their week's been like. You know, it's a lot more challenging for us as leaders to lead, you know, in the way we really want to. So we're having, I think, to find new ways of supporting our people in a hybrid world. So it's hard for our people, but I think it's a very challenging environment for leaders as well.
For sure.
There's a question come in the chat actually, which is quite interesting. Someone has said they were at an event a couple of weeks ago, and someone said, in brackets, a female, that we should all get comfortable being uncomfortable. What do you think that means for women in tech? Who wants to kick that one off? Denise?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick it up. I mean, it was so interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody about this before, because we were talking about, because it links to another question around mentoring. So it's one of my sort of mentees. And I was saying, she was asking about, you know, my career progression and some of the promotions that I've gone for. And I said to her, if you don't have a sort of those butterflies in your stomach, thinking, can I do this? Is this the right thing for me? Then it's probably not the right role. And for me, that's around getting used to being quite uncomfortable, because you should be constantly pushing yourself and your boundaries, because then when you look back, you think, what was I worried about? Of course I can do this role. Of course I can, you know, and it was some really good advice I got from David Evans, the famous David Evans, around where are you, you know, if you're going for a role and it's something that just makes you feel quite comfortable and it's a bit of a shoe-in, you're not going for the right role. And I've always had that every time I've then gone for new roles. If I haven't had that sense of nervousness and that being out of my comfort zone, then it's not the right thing for me. And I'm not pushing myself to learn new things. So it's putting yourself in certain situations that you may not be comfortable with. You know, you might have to be presenting something, you might have to be learning something new for customers, whatever it is, you will learn so much as a result of it. So that I think is what it means.
I think it's really closely linked to almost imposter syndrome, or as we like to know it. However, I did see that Stephen Bartlett put a post up. I think it was one of my colleagues actually put it up. He called it, rather than calling it imposter syndrome, and I really liked it, he called it it's your growth moment. So don't think of it in a negative way that it's an imposter syndrome. It's a growth moment for you. And I really like that, because we're taking away that negative bias on being uncomfortable, because when you're uncomfortable, you feel like you're being an imposter, I guess, don't you? Whereas actually, if you see it as a growth moment in your career and say, actually, it's slightly uncomfortable and therefore I must be learning and growing, to your point, Denise, I think that's a really good point to make there. Duncan, from your perspective, what's the kind of view on comfortable being uncomfortable, and what you think that means for women in tech?
Well, I think there's a couple of things here for me that really stand out. I mean, you know, within anything that you do, you can control and influence only so much, and then there's so much you have to accept. I think we probably need to get uncomfortable at challenging how much you accept. And, you know, how do you go back and say, actually, that's not acceptable. That isn't something that can continue. I do feel that at times, you know, it's about how do you do that and influence the stakeholders in a positive way, and that your intent is with, you know, with a good and positive intent can actually make a difference. I think that's the real thing about getting uncomfortable. You've got to understand that, you know, you are the agents of change, right? Nobody else goes and does it for you. You've got to have the ability to stand up. And, you know, again, going back to that example I was giving you earlier, what was disappointing was that I went and asked the question what I'd prefer, and that's what I drove towards at the end, was that I created an environment where somebody would come and tell me that I was making a crazy decision, or I was doing something that wasn't fair or equitable. You know, you've got to create that environment, but to get there, that's where you've got to challenge the norms. You've got to be willing to stand up, but you've got to do it in a way that is going to create the influence. It can't be belligerent. It's got to be with positive intent. And I think that's how I see being, you know, getting yourself into a position where, you know, you are going to create, you know, a feeling that's uncomfortable, both in yourself and probably in the area that you're challenging, whether it's your boss, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's the organization as a whole. But you've got to do it, because nobody else is going to do it for you.
That's a very good point. Thank you. And Sarah, if you were at an event and someone said to you that we should all get comfortable being uncomfortable, how would you respond to that?
Well, so there's uncomfortable for growth. And I think that's something you just have to embrace. And, you know, we know that women aren't going to apply for jobs unless they check every single box on the job description. So in that aspect, I would encourage, you know, do it for growth, do that, but also know where the boundaries are and what is unhealthy. You know, I've been at events where the behavior in and of itself was not okay. And I was uncomfortable with the behavior that was happening. And in that case, that for me, I will not embrace it. And it is something that I will address.
Thanks, Sarah. So we've got about 8 minutes left, and this chat has just flown by, I have to say. So just want to touch on the kind of world of mentoring and what more we can do as role models in the industry to encourage more mentoring, and equally the reverse mentoring side, which I have personal experience of, which was fantastic. And Denise, should we start with you on your experience of mentoring, whether that's David Evans or someone else in your life?
I won't mention David again, I promise.
Just how do you think this has really helped create equity mentoring?
I think it's, for me, in terms of the equity, so I make sure for my mentees they're male and female. So because I think it's again, it goes back to the comment that Duncan made around fairness, because what we don't want to do is sort of alienate the allies, at the expense of promoting sort of women in tech. So for me, it's around no, everybody is fair in terms of having that mentoring relationship. And actually for me that creates that culture of allyship, support, and equally around the reverse mentoring side. I mean, I've had a reverse mentor as well, and she was brilliant. I mean, it was around, she'd pull me up on things about the way I'd communicated things, and have you thought about it from this perspective, Denise? From a work situation all the way through to sort of recommending shoes for me to buy. I think she just became my stylist or something. But what was great, she's only a little bit older than my daughter, but it was great to get that different perspective, because I think, like we were talking about, equity and diversity, I think, go hand in hand. And the more we, particularly as leaders, again, it shows that level of humility that we don't know everything, and actually we want to learn. We might be well established in our careers, but we've still got a lot to learn, as opposed to those who are early in careers or new to tech or whatever. And I think it's a really great example to set, as long as we follow through on what we're being told. And she made sure, my reverse mentee, that I did follow through on it. So I couldn't get away with it in terms of the feedback she was giving me. So it was great. I found I benefit from both sides.
Yeah, that's great. And I wonder actually how many, and maybe Duncan, I'll put you on the spot here, how many senior executive leaders in the tech industry, from a male perspective, how many reverse mentors do they have, and how many of those are women? I don't expect you to know all the stats on that, Duncan, obviously, but I think it's a fascinating, if we looked at our chief execs or our kind of C-suite sort of male leaders, how many of those have reverse mentors and how many of them are female? I don't know if you've experienced in that.
No, I mean, I can probably only share my own experience. I mean, a lot of the reverse mentoring I get is by having what I would say is the open and crucial conversation with different members of my team. I've run a couple of programs where I've had official reverse mentors, and that's been absolutely fantastically positive, because I think, to Denise's point, there are certain there are what I call blind spots that everybody has, and to have those pointed out to you, I think are incredibly valuable. I think what I would probably say is not enough if the data shows that we're going backwards at the moment. That's a real worry for me. I mean, in my last organization, we could only measure gender in EMEA, and we went from 19 to 36%, for gender representation, and that was over a 4-year period, and that company was absolutely committed to it. That said, it didn't have strong enough programs, I felt, to make it, for the size of organization it was. I don't think the programs were as strong as they could have been. I think Microsoft is a great example of having great programs in that. But generally, I would say that from a supporting and reverse mentoring perspective, it would worry me a little bit, based on the data that we're starting to see, that that we're going backwards a little bit. Perhaps that's going back to the other question about COVID. Perhaps that's the impact that we're starting to see, is that you know, in that remote environment, people were allowed to start to ignore this subject a little bit more, which is probably, you know, and again, as an ally, that would really worry me. I don't think we do that at HashiCorp. I know Microsoft for sure definitely haven't ignored it, but it does worry me with the data that we're starting to see.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm conscious of time. We have 3 minutes, so I'm going to pose a bit of a quick fire question around to get perspectives on where we see the future for women in the tech industry in the next 10 years, let's say. What's your kind of quick fire views on that? And then I will wrap up the session. Sarah, let's start with you, please.
I think I would love to see us get better at inclusive thinking and a little bit more progressive in terms of non-traditional career paths. I think that really would help elevate women just generally across the board within the tech industry, and also strengthen our products in general.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Sarah. Denise?
I'm really optimistic. I'm an internal optimist anyway. I think there's great opportunity there. As we've talked about before, let's embrace all different career pathways. I think things like you're looking at AI now, I think it needs lots of diverse thinking, lots of different viewpoints in terms of how it should be applied. I think that's a great opportunity, again, for women to have a real seat at the table as well. So I'm very positive.
Maybe we should ask ChatGPT what they think.
Why don't we do that?
What they come up with, right? Duncan, over to you, final on it, and then I'll wrap up.
Yeah, I think I'm with Denise, right? I'm optimistic. Listen, you know, this industry across Europe and the UK, we've got 1.2 million jobs that we can't fill right now. Women have an absolute fantastic opportunity to get into this industry and change it. You know, for me, the rate of innovation, the pace of it, the ability to have social impact, to be well rewarded, and to get to see this world in a way, you know, that's what this industry offers people. We need to do a better job of creating the energy and excitement around what that opportunity looks like. And if we do that in 10 years' time, you should have gender parity in this industry across all roles. You know, it should be absolutely it's absolutely achievable. It's about a mindset to go get it done.
Awesome. Thank you, Duncan. I don't think I've got any more to add, but I just think that's brilliant. Thank you so much. So it's time, I'm afraid we've got to wrap up the session. I'd love to thank all our panel here for such a fantastic and inspiring discussion. Thank you. I haven't seen all the comments in the chat and what's been going on, but I'm sure everybody's had a great time listening to us today. I hope it's given you all, to all of our listeners, food for thought on how we can embrace equity in the tech industry. If you'd like to connect with our panelists, feel free to connect on LinkedIn and make sure you follow us to make and get any updates on our next live panels. We will make a recording of this panel available on YouTube shortly if you'd like to watch it again. And just with that, thank you again, everybody, for joining. I hope you have a great day celebrating all the women and allies in your life. Thank you very much.
And thank you to you, Louise, for emceeing for us.
You're very welcome.
Brilliantly. Well done. See you later. Bye.
Thank you.